The first crack in the foundation of my 5-year marriage to Julian appeared not with a shout, but with the sight of a stranger smiling at me from my seat. I had spent the better part of the afternoon preparing for this date, a private auction we were supposed to attend together. I'd chosen an emerald green dress that Julian once said brought out the gold in my hazel eyes, and I'd taken extra care with my makeup, anticipating a rare evening out with my perpetually busy husband. When his sleek black car pulled up, a flicker of my old self, the woman who still got butterflies at the sight of him, stirred in my chest. But when I opened the passenger door, that flicker died, extinguished by the sight of a young, stunningly beautiful girl sitting comfortably in the leather seat I considered mine. She had wide, innocent blue eyes and honey blonde hair that fell in soft waves around her shoulders. Her smile was sweet, practiced. "Hello, Ilara," she chirped, using my name with a familiarity she hadn't earned. I froze, my hand still on the door handle, the chill of the evening seeping into my bones. I said nothing, my gaze shifting from her to Julian. He was focused on his phone, scrolling through emails, utterly oblivious to the seismic shift happening inches away from him. "Hello, my name is Chloe," the girl continued, her voice a saccharine melody. "I'm Mr. Thorne's new assistant. I heard you were going to an auction tonight and I begged him to let me tag along to see the world. Don't worry, I won't be a bother." Every word was a calculated dart. Mr. Thorne. Not Julian. A deliberate show of professional deference that felt anything but. Begged him. Implying a level of casual pleading he had apparently allowed. See the world. Our world. My heart, which had been sinking, now felt like a stone at the bottom of a frozen lake. I knew this man. I knew the walls he built around himself, the fastidious control he exercised over his personal space. Our marriage had been arranged, a merger of two powerful families, the Thornes and the Sterlings. But after careful consideration we had chosen each other. He was a fortress and for years I had been the only one granted a key to the inner gate. He would look at me with a possessiveness that bordered on reverence and say, "You are my wife, Ilara. We are one. You are different." But today something was different. The fortress had an uninvited guest. "Get out," I said, my voice low and colder than I had intended. Chloe's smile faltered. The sweetness in her eyes was replaced by a flash of shock, then hurt. She hadn't expected this. She had expected a polite, strained acceptance, the kind of quiet suffering women in my social circle were often masters of. I'm sorry, Ilara," she stammered, her lower lip beginning to quiver with impressive speed. Julian finally looked up, drawn by the tension. His sharp, intelligent eyes, the color of a stormy sea, took in the scene. Me standing rigid by the open door and Chloe, a vision of wounded vulnerability. A faint line of impatience appeared between his brows. "What's going on?" he asked, his voice even. "Your assistant is in my seat," I stated, leaving no room for ambiguity. He sighed, a sound of mild exasperation that grated on my every nerve. "Ilara, it's just a seat." He leaned over, his familiar cedar and bergamot scent washing over me as he unfastened the passenger seatbelt Chloe had been using. "Here." He noticed the seat had been adjusted and, with a click of annoyance, moved it back to my preferred position. The entire gesture, him fixing my seat after another woman had been in it, felt like a violation. The small, intimate space we shared was now tainted. "The fuss you're making," he murmured, more to himself than to me. The air in the car was thick enough to choke on. Chloe, now in the back seat, was silent, but I could feel her tears like a physical pressure. Julian started the car, the purr of the engine a stark contrast to the silence between us. "If you're not in the mood, we can just go home," he suggested calmly, his eyes meeting mine in the rearview mirror. I saw it then, the reflection of Chloe silently crying, playing the perfect victim. Rage, clean and sharp, cut through my hurt. "Chloe, is it?" I said, not turning around. "I'm not in the mood to go anymore. You can take a cab home. Mr. Thorne and I are heading back." The girl's face in the mirror went pale. She looked to Julian, a silent plea in her glistening eyes. But he, ever the master of decorum, would never contradict me in front of an outsider. He simply gave a curt nod. "Chloe, expense a cab," he said, his voice devoid of emotion. She got out of the car, her shoulders slumped in devastation. As we drove away, leaving her on the curb, the silence in the car was no longer just thick. It was a wall and we were on opposite sides. He had chosen to save face with me, but he had let her in to begin with. And I knew with a certainty that chilled me to my core, that nothing would ever be the same again. The ride home was a study in suffocating silence. Julian turned on the classical station, the soaring strings of a violin concerto a mockingly beautiful backdrop to the ruin of our evening. I stared out the window, watching the glittering city lights blur past, each one feeling like a tiny mocking eye. He didn't try to explain until we were inside the stark minimalist sanctuary of our penthouse. The floor-to-ceiling windows showcased the city skyline, a kingdom we were supposed to rule together. "She's just a girl, Alara," he said, pouring himself a whiskey neat. He didn't offer me one. Fresh out of college, eager. Was it necessary to be so harsh? "Her eagerness seems to extend to my personal space and my husband's passenger seat," I replied, my voice dangerously calm as I slipped off my heels. "A space, I might add, that you have never in 5 years allowed anyone else to occupy. Not your mother, not your senior partners. No one." He turned, leaning against the bar, the picture of controlled frustration. "For the first time," he began, a strange, almost pleased note in his voice, "I see you can be jealous." The arrogance of it stole my breath. He crossed the room and pulled me into his arms. His body was warm and solid, a familiar comfort that now felt like a trap. "She is my subordinate. Nothing more. There will never be anything else between us." He cupped my face, his thumbs stroking my cheeks, his stormy eyes boring into mine. "I promise you." I wanted to believe him. The part of me that still loved the man I'd married, the man who would redden at the edges of his eyes when he was deeply moved, wanted to melt into that promise. But the image of Chloe's smiling face was seared behind my eyelids. I thought that would be the end of it. A stern warning, a re-established boundary. I was Alara Sterling. I didn't engage in petty squabbles with secretaries. The next morning, as I was reviewing the portfolio for my family's charitable foundation, my phone buzzed. It was a message from Isabel, Julian's chief assistant of 8 years. There was no text, just a screenshot of a social media post and a single photo. The photo was of Chloe. And around her neck, gleaming against her pale skin, was the crescent diamond necklace. The one from the auction we never attended. The one I had wanted. It was a piece of stellar artistry, a cascade of baguette diamonds forming a perfect crescent moon, worth a cool 2 million. And it was hanging from the neck of the girl who had cried in my husband's car. The screenshot was of her post. "The chairman said a girl must stay strong even when she's wronged. Wipe away the tears, will be obedient, my dear chairman." Followed by several cutesy fist-pumping emojis. Another picture showed the necklace in its velvet box. A cold, sharp fury unlike any I had ever known seized me. It wasn't just the money, it was the symbolism. He had given her the necklace I wanted as an apology for my behavior. He had validated her tears and invalidated my rightful anger. It was a public declaration within her small social circle that she had his favor. I felt provoked, baited. The desire to get in my Ferrari and slap the pretend innocence off her face was so visceral my palms itched. But then I looked at my hands, at the simple platinum wedding band I still wore, and the large, flawless diamond of my engagement ring. Crushing a cheap, pretentious coquette was beneath me. I would not stoop to her level. I would rise above it, so high she would be left in my shadow. I picked up my phone and called a private client manager at Hermes. "Amelie," I said, my voice smooth as silk. "It's Alara Thorne." Amelie's voice was instantly bright, laced with the barely suppressed excitement my calls always elicited. "Mrs. Thorne, what can I do for you today?" "I need 46 of the Shen Dianker punk necklaces. The ones with the diamond accents. And I need them delivered to Thorne Global's headquarters today, before the end of the workday." There was a brief, stunned silence on the other end. 46. Of the 120,000 yuan model. Yes. Every female assistant and office staff member at the executive level. Except one. A Chloe Miller. She is not to receive one. Understand perfectly, Mrs. Thorne. Don't you worry, even if we have to empty all the stores in Shanghai, I'll make sure you get what you want. I gave her the list Isabel had discreetly provided. Then I called Isabel back. "Isabel, you'll be receiving a delivery this afternoon. Please ensure every woman on that list posts a picture on their social media with the caption I'm about to send you." The caption was simple, elegant, and deadly. The chairman's wife said every girl deserves the best. Clench your fists, I will be obedient, my dear chairman's wife. The operation was executed with military precision. By 4 p.m. my phone began to light up with notifications. A cascade of posts from 46 different accounts, all featuring the distinctive orange Hermes box and the sleek modern necklace. The captions were a unified chorus, a direct and brutal counterpoint to Chloe's solitary, pathetic post. The chairman's wife really knows how to play the game, one clever assistant added. The gossip mill of Thorn Global, a formidable force, went into overdrive. In less than an hour, everyone knew that the chairman's wife had gifted everyone but Chloe a lavish piece of jewelry. The message was clear. Cross me and you will be ostracized. You are not special, you are alone. Isabel texted me an hour later. Mission accomplished. She just ran to the restroom in tears. Took the necklace off. Looks like she's heading to his office now. I felt a grim sense of satisfaction. The battlefield had been drawn and I had won the first real skirmish. But as I looked at the empty, silent penthouse, the victory felt hollow. I was now a general in a war I never wanted to fight, and my husband was the territory we were both trying to claim. The satisfaction of my Hermes gambit was a fleeting, brittle thing. It curdled in my stomach when Julian called, his voice a low, tense vibration through the phone. I'm bringing Chloe home. She wants to apologize to you in person. Home. He was bringing the infection into our sanctuary. That's not necessary, I said, my tone icy. It is, he insisted, and the line went dead. The finality in that single syllable was a door slamming shut. I stood in the center of our vast living room, the city sprawling beneath me like a captive galaxy. I didn't change out of my silk trousers and camisole. I wouldn't armor myself for her. I was the queen here, she was the supplicant. When the elevator chimed and they stepped out, the tableau was exactly as I had dreaded. Julian, looking stern and impossibly handsome in a tailored charcoal suit, and behind him Chloe, dwarfed by his presence, her eyes downcast. She looked like a scolded child, which I knew was precisely the point. I brought Chloe so she could clear things up, Julian began, his voice weary. Alara, she is just my secretary. Because of what happened yesterday, I casually gave her the necklace as an apology. Nothing more. I was at the dining table, slowly finishing a bowl of wild mushroom risotto Auntie had left for me. I took my time, letting the silence stretch, watching Chloe over the rim of my wine glass. She was trembling, a masterclass in performative fragility. I'm sorry, Alara, she whispered, giving a shallow, pathetic bow. This is the first time I've ever received such an expensive gift. I got a bit carried away. If I did something that upset you, you can tell me and I'll correct it immediately. I set my spoon down with a deliberate click. Chloe, is it? She glanced at Julian as if drawing strength and nodded. I'm not your teacher nor your boss. I don't have the time or the inclination to teach you how to behave. I leaned forward slightly, my voice dropping to a conversational yet deadly tone. But I am Julian's wife. And if any woman dares to get too close to my husband, I won't give her a chance to make things right. I will erase her. Her face, already pale, lost all remaining color. She looked genuinely terrified, and a sick part of me reveled in it. Alara, Julian's voice was a warning but a tired one. He understood my methods. Even if he didn't approve, he understood the provocation. He had made his concession by bringing her here. He expected me to make mine by accepting the apology. This was the unspoken dance of our marriage. I held his gaze for a long moment. The man I loved was in there, trapped behind a wall of misguided chivalry. I understand, I said finally, the words tasting like ash. But there won't be a next time. No matter who it is. He nodded, a silent treaty signed in the ruins of our evening. Chloe was ushered out, a sniveling mess. The air she left behind felt cheapened. Later, in our bedroom, the real conversation began. I was at my vanity, brushing my hair with long, slow strokes, watching his reflection in the mirror. You didn't need to resort to such tactics against a girl, he said, pouring himself a glass of ice water at the bar. You should have told me first. I met his reflected gaze. You knew I liked that necklace. Yet you gave it to another woman. Isn't it natural for me to be angry? The brush stilled in my hand. I can't stand the thought of you being tainted, Julian. I can't stand wondering if I could still love you the same. He remained infuriatingly calm. She cried the whole night because of your misunderstanding. In the morning when I saw her eyes were swollen, I gave her the necklace. An apology. 2 million is a small amount for an apology, I mused, turning to face him directly. It's just a matter of whether the recipient is worth it. His fingertips tapped a silent rhythm on the marble countertop. He was waiting for me to see reason, to fold back into the perfectly composed wife he knew. But that wife was cracking. Julian, I said, my voice soft but clear in the vast room. I love you. He stilled, his fingers freezing mid-tap. He hadn't expected that. Not now. I love that pure, untainted version of you. That's what set you apart. You never used to let women get close because you had an aversion to anything impure. You wanted a clean marriage. I stood and walked towards him. I wasn't always that person, but your values became mine. We share the same life goals. I hope our marriage never takes a wrong turn. He let out a long, slow sigh. It hasn't. But his eyes, for the first time, wouldn't quite meet mine. The crack was there, a hairline fracture in the foundation of us, and we were both standing on it, pretending the ground was still solid. Julian, to his credit, seemed to take my words to heart. For the next 2 weeks there was a fragile peace. He was home for dinner more often. He didn't mention Chloe. I thought, perhaps foolishly, that the storm had passed. I was wrong. I had underestimated the depth of his blind spot. The turning point came on a Tuesday. Isabel called me, her voice shaking with a mixture of fury and fear. He fired me, she said, and I could hear the tears she was fighting back. What? Why? He found out about the Hermes gifts. He said I was unable to distinguish right from wrong, using my position to oppress colleagues. She took a shuddering breath. But Alara, that's not the real reason. He saw her. He saw Chloe on her hands and knees in a conference room, scraping gum off the carpet with a blade. She looked like a martyr, and he lost it. The image made me nauseous. Not because of Chloe's plight, but because of its perfect, pathetic staging. And Julian, my brilliant, perceptive husband, had fallen for it. He came home that night like a thundercloud. The moment he stepped out of the elevator, the air in the penthouse turned to ice. I handed him a glass of water, a peace offering. He took it, his eyes burning with a cold fire I had never seen directed at me. Then, with a sudden violent jerk of his arm, he smashed the crystal tumbler onto the marble floor. Water and shards of glass exploded at my feet. "Why won't you leave her alone?" he roared, his voice raw. "Alara, I respect you. I love you. And I have tolerated your insults and your harm towards her time and time again. What satisfaction do you get from bullying someone weaker?" The words were physical blows. I stood frozen amidst the glittering wreckage, my heart pounding a frantic, painful rhythm against my ribs. He knew. He knew about his sister, Sophia, who had jumped from her school roof after years of relentless bullying. He knew the scar it had left on his soul, his visceral loathing for predators. And he was casting me as the villain. "Alara," he said, his voice dropping to a deadly whisper, using my first name in a way that felt like a divorce. "Don't let me see you use these methods to hurt others again. Or I won't stand by idly." He stared at me, waiting for a denial, for an explanation. But I was too stunned, too wounded. The glass wasn't just on the floor. It was between us, a million sharp, irreparable pieces. He had chosen his narrative. He had chosen to see her as the victim and me as the monster. And in that moment, watching the man I loved disintegrate before my eyes for another woman, something in me broke. Not with a sob, but with a silent, resolute snap. The fight to save my marriage was over. Now it was about survival. The silence after Julian's outburst was more deafening than the shattering glass. He didn't wait for a response I couldn't give. He turned, walked into his study, and emerged 10 minutes later with a small overnight bag. The sight of it, so final, so deliberate, stole the breath from my lungs. "I'll be at the Grand Metropolitan," he said, his voice flat, all the fire extinguished, leaving only cold ash. He didn't look at me as he stepped into the elevator. The doors slid shut and he was gone. I stood there for a long time, staring at the closed doors, then down at the wreckage at my feet. The housekeeper, Mrs. Lawson, emerged from the kitchen, her face etched with worry. "Oh, ma'am." She began, moving to clean up the mess. "Leave it," I said, my voice strangely calm. She hesitated, then nodded and retreated. I needed to see it. I needed to feel the full, brutal weight of what had just happened. My husband had left our home. For the first time in 5 years he would not be sleeping beside me. And he had left because he believed I was a bully, a monster who tormented a helpless girl. The irony was a bitter poison. I, who had spent years building a life with him, curating our home, supporting his ambitions, was now the antagonist in a story he was writing with his secretary. The next day, Chloe came to pick up more of his clothes. Mrs. Lawson, having received a call from Julian, had already packed 2 large suitcases. When Chloe arrived, she was the picture of timid efficiency, dressed in a conservative high-necked blouse that somehow managed to look both innocent and provocative. She took the suitcases from Mrs. Lawson, her eyes darting around the penthouse, taking in the stark, expensive beauty she had helped fracture. Before she could escape, she turned to me, a new, unsettling confidence in her demeanor. "Ma'am," she said, her voice soft but clear. "Mr. Thorne asked me to add you as a friend on the company messaging app. In the future, if you need to communicate anything regarding his schedule or needs, you can contact me directly." The audacity. With Isabel gone, she had seamlessly slid into the role of his chief assistant. She was now the gatekeeper to my own husband. I looked at her, this girl who had dismantled my life with nothing but tears and calculated smiles. "There's nothing to discuss," I said, my voice devoid of all emotion. "You can tell him to get as far away from me as possible." A flicker of confusion crossed her face, followed by a dawning, triumphant understanding. She didn't understand my defiance because in her world, a woman whose husband had left her was supposed to be broken, begging. My pride was a language she didn't speak. She simply nodded and left, the victor claiming her spoils. Mrs. Lawson shook her head. "Ma'am, why don't you just give in a little? Go and talk to him. The two of you never used to fight like this." I gave her a sad smile. "He's waiting for me to apologize, Mrs. Lawson. And I have nothing to apologize for." The Cold War had begun. Julian did not return. But Chloe's social media became a vibrant, torturous chronicle of his life without me. It was her new weapon and she wielded it with devastating skill. My phone became a delivery system for silent grenades. Mutual friends, puzzled and concerned, sent me screenshots. A post from a private equity gala in Dubai. Chloe in a gown worth more than her annual salary, standing just behind Julian, a glass of champagne in her hand. The caption, "The view from the top is even more breathtaking with a visionary leader. #learning from the best #Burj Al Arab Nights." A picture of a custom evening gown being fitted, tagged at a famous atelier. The chairman insists on perfection in every detail, even for a mere assistant accompanying him to a state dinner. The pressure is real. A snapshot of fireworks over a summit forum. Watching stars explode in the sky while discussing mergers and acquisitions. Just a typical Tuesday. #SummitLife #grateful. Each post was a carefully crafted lie of omission, screaming an intimacy that didn't exist but was designed to be perceived. She was showcasing a life I had been erased from, positioning herself as his new shiny accessory. The comments were a chorus of envious friends and colleagues, some even suggesting she start a vlog about the daily life of the upper class. I didn't have the energy to respond to my friends' concerned messages. I simply sent back a heart emoji or a "thanks for letting me know." Their pity was almost as unbearable as Chloe's gloating. Because while she was playing her petty games, I was engaging in the real war. I called Benjamin Croft, the managing partner of Croft and Sterling, my family's private accounting firm. "Benjamin, it's Alara," I said, my voice all business. "I need you to personally oversee a project for me. The complete and total division of all my assets from Julian Thorne's." There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end. "Alara, are you sure? This is monumental." "I've never been more sure of anything in my life," I replied, looking out at the city. "It's a massive task. Premarital, postmarital, the joint holdings, the family funds, the foreign properties, the stocks, the yachts. I want it all itemized, valued, and separated." "It will take months," he warned. "Then we should start now." And so I began the long, arduous process of unweaving the tapestry of our life together. It was a brutal, clinical dissection of 5 years of partnership. Every stock portfolio, every deed to a foreign villa, every piece of art we had bought together, was now just a line item on a spreadsheet, to be divided and conquered. It was during this time, amidst the dry legal documents and financial statements, that I conceived of my most potent weapon. The idea came to me as I was reviewing the deed for a vineyard in Tuscany we had bought on our second anniversary. Julian had whispered to me among the grapevines, his lips stained with wine, that he wanted to fill that house with children. A plan cold and brilliant began to form. He thought he could shame me, exile me, and replace me with a cheaper model. He thought my only power was in buying Hermes necklaces for 46 people. He was about to learn that Alara Sterling, when cornered, did not fight for scraps. She rewrote the rules of the game entirely. And she played to win. The summons came a month into our Cold War. A text from Julian that was as sterile as a corporate memo. Mother expects us for dinner at the estate tonight. I'll have a car pick you up at 7. No please, no, are you free? Just an expectation. The machinery of our public facade had to be maintained, even while the private engine lay in ruins. I stared at the message, my thumb hovering over the screen. A part of me, the wounded, prideful part, wanted to refuse. But the strategist in me knew this was a necessary move. I needed to see him. I needed to gauge the battlefield. Fine, I texted back. At 7 p.m. sharp, the familiar black car pulled up. I opened the rear door out of habit and froze for the second time. The tableau was a perfect, sickening mirror of the night this all began. Julian and Chloe sat in the back, deep in conversation. They had left the front passenger seat for me. The humiliation was so precise, so calculated, it was almost an art form. Chloe looked up, a faint, apologetic smile playing on her lips. Alara, so good to see you. Her tone was that of a hostess graciously welcoming a slightly inconvenient guest. Julian barely glanced at me. Get in, he said, his attention already back to the tablet in his hand. For a moment, I considered slamming the door, calling my own car, and telling his mother exactly where he could stick his family dinner. But then I saw it, the barely concealed triumph in Chloe's eyes. She was waiting for me to explode, to play the hysterical wife, to cement my role as the unreasonable villain in their narrative. So I did the one thing they didn't expect. I smiled. A cool, detached curve of my lips. Of course, I said, my voice pleasant. I calmly slid into the front passenger seat, accepting my demotion with a grace that clearly unnerved them both. The drive to the Thorne estate was a silent 20-minute journey through the gates of my own personal hell. Chloe, unable to bear the quiet, was the first to break it. Alara, we just got back from Zurich this morning. The Dowager Mrs. Thorne mentioned she wanted to see Julian, and I'd picked up some gifts, so I thought I'd accompany him to pay our respects. Our respects. The pronoun hung in the air, thick and offensive. I didn't respond. I simply closed my eyes, feigning rest, letting the sound of the engine and their shared, complicit silence wash over me. When we arrived, Julian's mother, Eleanor Thorne, a woman whose elegance was as sharp and unyielding as a diamond, greeted us at the door. Her eyes, the same stormy gray as her son's, widened almost imperceptibly at the sight of Chloe. Julian. Alara, she said, her tone carefully neutral. She then turned her gaze to the girl clinging to her son's shadow. Mother, this is Chloe Miller, my executive assistant, Julian introduced. Chloe launched into a performance of sycophantic charm, complimenting the artwork, the gardens, the very air in the Thorne mansion. She had done her homework. By the time we sat down for dinner, she had Eleanor smiling at a few of her anecdotes about Julian's idiosyncrasies at work. The atmosphere was a fragile bubble of forced civility. Chloe, emboldened, began steering the conversation toward Julian's personal life. His preference for a specific brand of espresso, his habit of working late, the music he listened to when stressed. Territories that were once exclusively mine. Eleanor's smile became fixed, her eyes flicking towards me with a dawning understanding. She was no fool. Julian remained silent, a king allowing his new favorite courtier to speak out of turn. I watched it all unfold, a spectator to the dismantling of my place at this table. I elegantly dabbed the corners of my mouth with a linen napkin, the gesture a period at the end of their sentence. Eleanor, I said, my voice cutting through Chloe's prattling about Julian's favorite vintage. I have some wonderful news. All eyes turned to me. Julian finally looked up from his plate, his expression unreadable. I'm pregnant. The silence that followed was absolute. The air itself seemed to still. Eleanor's fork clattered softly against her plate. Her face, for a single unguarded moment, was a canvas of pure, unadulterated shock, which then melted into radiant joy. "Alara. My dear, is it true?" she breathed, her hand fluttering to her chest. "When did you find out? We must call your father-in-law. We must see Dr. Evans first thing tomorrow." Chloe looked as if she'd been slapped. Her mouth opened, then closed, her big, innocent eyes wide with disbelief. Julian was staring at me, a maelstrom of emotions warring on his face. Shock, confusion, and a flicker of something that looked like desperate, impossible hope. "I just found out yesterday," I said, my voice serene. "Dr. Evans confirmed it. I'm 3 weeks along." I emphasized the timeline. 3 weeks. The exact period during which Julian had been living in a hotel, nursing his righteous anger. The math was a sledgehammer. Chloe found her voice, a thin, reedy thing. "Alara, are you sure about the timing?" She looked at Julian, her eyes pleading. "Mr. Thorne and I have been traveling almost constantly for the past 2 months." The implication hung in the air, toxic and undeniable. "There's no mistake," I said, my gaze locked on Julian. "I saw the renowned Dr. Evans." She confirmed it's been 3 weeks. The warmth drained from Julian's face, replaced by a chilling, stone-like stillness. A storm was brewing in the depths of his eyes, a hurricane of betrayal and rage he was desperately trying to contain. "Alara," he said, my name a low, dangerous warning. My smile only grew wider, more triumphant. This was the checkmate I had planned, but the taste of it was not sweet. It was corrosive. "Congratulations, Julian. You're going to be a father." I let the words hang for a beat. "Don't worry, it's not a joke." I placed the folded pregnancy report I had prepared on the table between us, sliding it toward him like a business proposition. "While you were off on your working trips with your assistant," I continued, my tone conversational, "I was feeling rather lonely. I reconnected with a few old flames." I shrugged a delicate shoulder. "Now I don't even know who the father is. It's all so terribly messy." I saw his knuckles whiten as he gripped the edge of the table. "If you don't mind," I added, the final brutal twist of the knife, "I could let the child call you Dad. But he'll have to take my last name." "Enough." Julian's voice exploded through the dining room, shattering the fine china and the last vestiges of our marriage. He was on his feet, his body trembling with a fury I had never witnessed. I paid no heed to his anger. I stood as well, feeling a strange, hollow power coursing through me. "Julian," I said, my voice cold and clear, "how does it feel to be cheated on?" The words were a guillotine. His face was a mask of utter devastation. He had never imagined I would retaliate like this, that I would burn our entire world to the ground rather than live in the gilded cage he and Chloe were building for me. I looked at his ashen face, at Chloe's horrified expression, at Eleanor's stunned silence. "Let's get a divorce, Julian." I didn't wait for a response. I turned and walked out of the dining room, out of the Thorne estate, leaving the ruins of our life together behind me. The war was over. I had just detonated the final bomb. He didn't let me get far. I had just reached the end of the manicured driveway, the cool night air a shock against my feverish skin, when his hand closed around my arm, his grip like iron. "We are not done," Julian growled, his voice raw and ragged. He half dragged me back to his car, shoved me into the passenger seat, my seat, and peeled away from the estate, leaving a stunned Chloe and his mother behind. He didn't speak during the drive back to the penthouse. The silence was a physical force, thick with his rage and my cold defiance. When the elevator doors opened into our home, he stopped dead. The penthouse was empty. Not of furniture, but of life. Of me. In the weeks of his absence, I had systematically erased myself. My books were gone from the shelves. The art I had collected was crated. My wardrobe was cleared out, save for a few items I would send for later. The vibrant, personal touches that had made this stark modern space a home had vanished, leaving behind a beautiful, sterile shell. He walked through the rooms, his footsteps echoing on the polished concrete. He saw the empty spaces where my things had been, and the reality of my words, my actions finally seemed to crash down on him. This hadn't been an impulsive declaration at a dinner party. This had been a planned, strategic withdrawal. "Alara," he said, my name a broken whisper. He turned to me, his eyes, once a stormy sea, now just devastated. "I didn't cheat." He stumbled towards me, pulling me into his arms. His body was trembling. You can get rid of the baby. We can start over. We can fix this." I pushed him away, the touch of him now repulsive. That's my child, I retorted, my voice scathing. Why would I get rid of it? My calmness, my absolute refusal to play the repentant wife, seemed to shatter something in him. I didn't do anything wrong. You know that. Yes, I know, I said, my voice flat. You're still clean. But what's the point? I walked to the window, putting distance between us. You had her come to our home knowing it would disgust me. You took her to every event knowing I'd be the subject of pity and ridicule. You knew all of it and you did it anyway. You allowed her to provoke me time and again, and when I finally reacted, you cast me as the monster. The tears I had been holding back for months finally came, not as sobs, but as a hot, silent stream down my face. You knew she had feelings for you, didn't you? I warned you, Julian. Willful ignorance is more deadly than ignorance itself. He stood there, his shoulders slumped, his stance unsteady. He looked like a man who had set a fire to scare away a wolf and had ended up burning down his entire forest. I'm sorry, Clara, he whispered, the words barely audible. She reminded me of Sophia. The name of his dead sister hung in the air between us, a ghost he had never laid to rest. And I was afraid, he choked out, terrified that you would turn into one of those monsters who tormented her. I saw her cry and I couldn't stand it. I never had any thoughts about her. I just didn't want to see her hurt. The truth, the pathetic, tragic truth, was finally out. It wasn't about attraction. It was about a scar so deep it had made him blind. He had sacrificed his wife on the altar of his sister's memory. Looking at his remorse, I felt nothing. No pity, no warmth, no love. Maybe he was innocent of infidelity, but he was guilty of a far greater crime. He had handed my heart to another woman to break and then blamed me for the bleeding. I would never be foolish enough to hand him the pieces again. Julian refused to sign the divorce papers. For weeks he tried to backtrack, to fix the unfixable. He fired the new handsome male assistant he'd hired and showed up at the penthouse one night, drunk out of his mind. I found him in the wine cellar, slumped against a rack of Chateau Margaux. It took all my strength to haul him to the living room couch. He was a quiet drunk, compliant and sorrowful. But when I tried to leave, his hand shot out, his fingers closing around my wrist with surprising strength. His eyes were red-rimmed, swimming in alcohol and regret. Elara, he slurred, his voice thick. Please. Let's not get a divorce. If you want this child, then have him. We can raise him together. It was the most desperate plea he could have made. But it was too late. The trust was gone, ground to dust. As for Chloe, he mumbled, his head lolling back, a large corporation has rules, can't fire without cause. But the chairman's deliberate distancing was a punishment in itself. The former Golden Girl, the personal assistant to the chairman, became a pariah overnight. The subject of private ridicule, her fall from grace was as swift as it was brutal. He came to see me one last time. The youthful radiance was gone, replaced by a hard, brittle exhaustion that no amount of makeup could conceal. I saw you on my first day at the company, she said, her opening gambit surprising me. She wasn't here to apologize. She was here to justify her war. That day I brought you tea. You and Julian were discussing a wedding gift for a friend. You never once looked at me. Her face was a mask of bitter mockery. For someone like him, if it weren't for work, I'd never have had a chance. And you were just born into it. You never earned it. I ordered a coffee for myself, the picture of detached amusement. My calmness seemed to infuriate her more than any slap could have. Someone like you, a spoiled rich girl, what right do you have to look down on me? She spat, her contempt laid bare. You don't deserve his love. Is that so? I asked, taking a slow sip. Did you manage to get it? Her composure shattered. You're just a bad-tempered, jobless has-been who's pregnant with another man's bastard. Do you think he'll still want you? Fup. The sound was sharp and satisfying in the quiet room. My palms stung. I hadn't even realized I was going to do it. First, I said, my voice dangerously quiet, no matter how old I am, I'm still 2 years younger than your precious Mr. Thorne. Second, who do you think you are, calling my child a bastard? I took a step closer and she flinched back. And lastly, I've been wanting to slap you for a very long time, you pathetic little fool. She fled then, her pride in tatters, but the victory felt emptier than ever. I was just mopping up the remnants of a battle in a war I had already won, in a kingdom I no longer wanted any part of. When I was 4 months pregnant, the Thorne family's legal and financial advisors finally convinced Julian that there was no path back. The scandal of a pregnant wife suing for divorce was a far greater threat to the corporate stability of Thorne Global than a quiet, mutual separation. The pressure from his own board was a force even he couldn't ignore. We met in Benjamin Croft's office, a sterile, beautiful space high above the city, a world away from the home we had shared. The division of assets was a masterpiece of forensic accounting, a testament to the months of work Benjamin and I had poured into it. The premarital holdings were clear. The postmarital joint finances, meticulously organized by me, were divided with a chilling efficiency. Neither side had any objections. There was nothing left to fight over but the ashes. Julian arrived looking like a ghost of himself. The vibrant, powerful man I had married was gone, replaced by a figure of profound loss, his wings broken by his own hand. He looked at me across the vast mahogany table, his eyes hollow. I was showing now a small, firm bump beneath my cashmere dress, a living, breathing testament to his failure and my freedom. He picked up the pen. His hand, usually so steady, trembled slightly. He looked at me one last time, a silent, desperate question in his eyes. I gave him nothing. My face was a calm, unmoving mask. He lowered his head and signed. The scratch of the pen was the only sound in the room. It was over. We divorced with a dignity that belied the ugly, bloody war that had preceded it. We said our goodbyes with a quiet nod, two business partners dissolving a venture that had ultimately failed. There were no more words left that could bridge the chasm between us. My son was born on a bright spring morning. He was not premature, despite what the discreet announcements suggested. He was robust and healthy, with a shock of dark hair and eyes that even on the first day held a familiar stormy gray promise. I named him Leo and he took my last name, Sterling. My mother, when she saw him, gasped. "Alara, he's the image of..." She trailed off, her eyes wide with confusion and dawning understanding. "I don't want to talk about it, Mother," I said, cutting her off gently but firmly. The so-called one-night stands had been a fiction, a necessary lie. The truth was far simpler and far more tragic. Leo was conceived in one of our last, desperate attempts to reconnect before the chasm became uncrossable. He was entirely wholly Julian's. But they didn't need to know that. Since he was a boy, my parents, the Sterlings, ceased their subtle pressures for me to remarry. They saw in him a future heir to the Sterling Empire, and that was enough for them. As Leo grew, the resemblance to his father became uncanny. The same serious expression, the same way of tilting his head when curious. It was a constant, bittersweet reminder of a love I had systematically destroyed. Freed from the constraints of my marriage, I built a new life. I traveled. I took a more active role in the Sterling Foundation. I had a series of charming, uncomplicated boyfriends who asked for nothing and expected less. I was happy in a quiet, self-contained way. Isabel and I remained friends. From her, now a high-powered executive at a rival firm, I heard the occasional piece of gossip. Chloe didn't last 6 months after my departure. The environment at Thorne Global, once Julian withdrew his protective, misguided favor, became too hostile for her to bear. She left on her own accord, but in our small, incestuous world, everyone knew her story. No major corporation would touch her. Her ambition had been her downfall. Julian, she told me, had become a ghost in his own company. He buried himself in work, growing more isolated and focused, a king ruling over a silent, empty castle. Every year, during the annual shareholders' meeting of the joint ventures our families still co-owned, my father insisted I return to the city to represent the Sterling interests. I knew what he was doing, it amused me, but I never acknowledged it. And every year after the meeting, Julian would find me. He would pull me aside, his presence still commanding, yet softer now, lined with a permanent regret. "The car is waiting," he would say. "It's on the way to your parents. I heard you're staying for the new year." It was never a question. It was a plea. And every year I would relent. Because of Leo. Someone, a nanny, a relative I never discovered who, had told him that Julian was his father. So when my son saw him, his little face would light up with a joy so pure it was almost painful to witness. He would wriggle out of my grasp, his little body vibrating with excitement, and call out, "Daddy." Up. Julian's face, usually so stern and closed, would transform. He would sweep Leo into his arms, his eyes crinkling at the corners with a smile that never quite reached the lingering sadness in their depths. He adored him. He never refused him anything. How could he not understand? As our son's features became more defined, the truth was as plain as the nose on his face. Leo was a miniature Julian. During those New Year visits, Julian would cancel all his engagements to be with us. He'd try to ask the question that was always in his eyes. Alara, should we think about? I would always refuse. Gently but firmly. No, Julian. Marriage to me was a sacrament. It was meant to be perfect, a pristine sanctuary. If it couldn't be that, it was nothing. A compromised marriage was just a beautifully decorated prison sentence. But Leo was the bridge we could never fully burn. He would insist on sitting between us at the dinner table, his small head swiveling back and forth, calling Mommy on one side and Daddy on the other, laughing with a simple, profound joy that believed he had put his broken world back together. I would tap the back of his head lightly. Don't call out randomly, Leo, I'd say, my voice softer than I intended. And I would see Julian's eyes redden, see him look down at his plate, utterly lost. He had 1,000 apologies in his heart, a lifetime of regrets. But some wounds are too deep. Some trusts, once shattered, can never be fully mended. We were bound forever by the son we both loved, living in the quiet, permanent shadow of the perfect marriage we had failed to keep. The years settled into a new rhythm, a constellation of 3 where there should have been a solid, unbreakable dyad. Leo was the sun around which Julian and I orbited, 2 planets held in a fragile gravitational pull, close enough to feel the warmth, but forever separated by the void of our past. My life as Alara Sterling, single mother and heir to a fortune, was full. I found a purpose I hadn't known I was missing in the Sterling Foundation, channeling my energy and resources into funding arts education for underprivileged children. It was real, tangible work that filled the spaces that might have otherwise echoed with loneliness. The boyfriends came and went. A charming sculptor, a witty journalist, a serene yoga instructor. They were pleasant distractions, but they never touched the core of me, the part that had been cauterized by the end of my marriage. I was content, but I was never again unbound. Leo, and the silent, shared history with his father, was my new center of gravity. Julian, as reported by Isabel and confirmed by the business pages, had become a titan of industry, but a solitary one. Thorn Global expanded its empire, but the man at its helm was famously private, almost reclusive. The gossip that once swirled around him and Chloe had long since died, replaced by a respectful awe for his business acumen and a quiet pity for his seemingly empty personal life. He never dated, as far as anyone could tell. It was as if, after our divorce, he had simply retired from the field of human connection, save for one. Every summer for 2 weeks and every New Year for a few days, we became a temporary unit. Julian would rent a sprawling, sun-drenched villa in Tuscany, not far from the vineyard we once owned together. It was there, watching Leo chase fireflies in the twilight, his delighted shrieks echoing through the olive groves, that the ghost of our old life felt most present. One such evening, Leo, exhausted from a day of swimming and exploration, fell asleep in Julian's arms on the terrace. The sun had dipped below the hills, painting the sky in streaks of violet and orange. I brought out a blanket and draped it over our son, my hand brushing against Julian's arm. We both stilled at the accidental contact. I made to move away, but his voice, low and hesitant, stopped me. Stay. Please. I sat in the adjacent chair, the silence between us not hostile, but heavy with all the words we never said. He has your laugh, Julian said, his gaze fixed on Leo's sleeping face. That little hiccup at the end. I never noticed it before. He has your stubbornness, I countered softly, and your terrible sense of direction. He gets lost between his bedroom and the bathroom. A faint, genuine smile touched Julian's lips, the first I had seen in years that wasn't reserved solely for Leo. He's perfect, he whispered, and the raw love in his voice was a physical thing in the quiet air. The silence stretched, comfortable now, woven with the shared thread of our son. Ilara, he began again, his voice gaining a new tentative strength. I need to say this. Just once. I was wrong. Not just mistaken. I was arrogantly, destructively wrong. He finally turned to look at me, his stormy eyes clear and unguarded in the dim light. I used the memory of my sister's pain as a shield against seeing the pain I was causing you. I let a stranger become more important than my wife. I failed you in every way a husband can fail his wife. There is no apology vast enough to cover the debt of what I did. I looked at him, at the man I had loved with a ferocity that had ultimately turned to ash. The anger was long gone. In its place was a profound, quiet sadness. I know, Julian, I said. I've always known. I live with it every day, he admitted, his voice thick. The sight of Leo is my greatest joy and my most constant penance. He is the living proof of what I threw away. I didn't correct him. I didn't tell him that Leo was the final desperate act of a love that was already dying, a last attempt to anchor us that had instead become the chain that bound us in this strange, peaceful purgatory. That truth felt too cruel, and I was done with cruelty. We can't go back, Julian, I said, my voice firm but not unkind. That bridge is ashes. I'm not asking to go back, he said, his eyes pleading. I'm asking if there's any chance at all, we could build something new? Not what we had. Something different. For him. For us. He was asking for the compromise I had always refused. A mended vase forever showing its cracks. I looked from his hopeful, desperate face to our son, sleeping peacefully in the circle of his father's arms. Leo, who believed with his whole heart that mommy and daddy were two stars in the same fixed sky. I reached out and gently smoothed a stray curl from Leo's forehead. This, I said softly, gesturing to the three of us on the terrace, the Tuscan night settling around us. This is what we have, Julian. It's not the sanctuary I wanted. It's not the perfect marriage. But it's real. And it's enough. It was neither a yes nor a no. It was an acceptance of the complicated, imperfect present. Julian understood. The desperate hope in his eyes dimmed, but didn't extinguish. He nodded slowly, a silent acceptance of my terms. It would never be the grand, epic love story we had once envisioned. It would be this. Shared holidays, quiet conversations in the twilight, and the boundless, unifying love for a boy who was the best of us both. We sat there in silence for a long time, two fallen stars, learning to navigate the dark by the light of the new sun we had created together. The past was a country we could never return to, but the future, for the first time since it all fell apart, felt not like an ending, but like a fragile yet enduring peace. The end.